This is how many of my children have come to me. I am a foster parent. T came with clothes that were too small. Baby D came with just a bag and was separated from his sister. My son, he thought he was coming for a long weekend. And sweet little Bit, well, she came just 2 days after her 4th birthday and is currently separated from the only biological sibling that she knows. I can see that it will take this boy being dead or nearly dead before anyone listens. I said one day through my tears on a lunch break at work, to help you better understand what brought me to this point, I suppose I should probably back up just a little bit. You see, my daughter came to me in the most unusual of ways. My uncle called asking us if we would consider taking her permanently. Her mother, my cousin, was not doing the things that were expected of her to get her 3 children back. And so, with a heavy heart, we said yes, knowing that we were going to be separating her from her brother and sister. She went on to have another child, a sweet little boy, because in this state, like many states, every child is a new beginning, a fresh start, a do-over. It didn't matter that 3 children were removed for abuse and neglect. It didn't matter that those children were then adopted out 3 different ways. It didn't matter. That she took off to North Dakota. And for even a short amount of time in North Dakota, that he was taken into state custody. You see, for the state to hear the cries of just this one child, it took a life-altering car crash involving drinking and driving, a 10-acre fire, 3 counts of vehicular homicide, and her son's back broken in 3 different places. Before the state finally decided that that was enough. Because in our state, we value biology over the life of a child. A community can change the way it sees the foster care system by breaking down those myths associated with that system. And friends, when a community is seeking the healing of its children, they're seeking a revolution. So let's start breaking down some of those myths. Number 1, it's been said, and even just recently in some of the news articles read, that CPS will just come in, swoop in, and take children out of healthy homes because maybe you chose to bottle feed, homeschool, or not immunize, or that CPS does not give children enough time to reunify with their children and engage in services. CPS is a part of DCYF, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. So when you're calling the CPS line, you're actually calling 1-866 End Harm. And if you don't know this number, I would encourage you to please go ahead and take a picture of that. Because if you see abuse and neglect, well, you should be calling it in. And make no mistake, it takes more than just one call for a child to be removed. Also, if you've been following the news lately, you know that we are actually in a foster parent crisis right now. In our state, we have roughly 10,000 children currently in state care. Although, as news reports have indicated, we are short by at least 1,000 homes. So where does that leave our children? Well, it leaves them in hotels and office stays. So it's pretty safe to say that in a state in such a crisis, they are not coming to take your children because you chose the bottle over the breast, decided to not immunize, or maybe even chose to homeschool. It's just not happening. There's no place to go. DCYF works together with families to try to keep them in the home in the first place, offering resources and a variety of different programs. It's also been said that they do not give families enough time to engage in services once a child is removed. In my experience, that's simply not true. The state gives parents too much time. And here's why. Every child is treated as a separate case. Every single time that child enters back into care, their clock restarts. So whether they're reunified at 12 months or they come back into care 6 months, 1 week, 2 weeks later, that clock starts all over again for that child. Number 2, and I hear this very frequently, I couldn't be a foster parent. I would get too attached. One caring person in a child's life could change their trajectory. And the fact is, you're right. You would get too attached. And that's sort of the entire point. Research notes that adults creating a positive impact and bonding with a child can set them up for lasting relationships all the way into their adulthood. When you're bonding with that child, you're laying foundational skills so that they can bond when they go back home to their families. It's noted that 19 months is the average stay in foster care. So you can be pretty safe to say that in 19 months, not only you, but your entire family is going to become bonded to that child. Because it is you who are opening the door when that child walks in, scared, sad, maybe mad, with little to no clothing. It's you who sings away the monsters in the middle of the night, because to them, those monsters are very real, and there is almost always truth in the monsters that they scream about. It's you who teaches them to put words to those basic feelings of hot, cold, scared, tired, hungry, thirsty, because maybe they didn't have the words to articulate those feelings before. But it's also you who sees in their joys, their milestones, from first volleyball games to the excitement you see on them when you go to a family vacation and hear about their first love. Simply put, it's not about me, it's about them. And knowing what I know now about foster care, how could I ever turn away? Does my family grieve when a child goes home? You bet. But we also know that for just a moment in that child's life, we created a sense of stability and safety. Number 3, and probably one of the most common myths we hear, that foster parents do it for the money. So it's easiest to break this down by straight facts that you could pull up on the DSHS website. Children are broken out by levels, from a basic or a level 1 to a level 4. The state determines these levels based on medical and behavioral needs. In my home, we primarily take levels 1 and 2. And from there, it's also broken down by their age groups. So we're gonna take it a level 1, and you'll see the monthly reimbursement check you get after a month of having that child. For ages 0 to 5, at the end of the month, you would receive $562. For ages 6 to 11, it would be $683. And for ages 12 and up, it's $783. You factor in food, clothing, school supplies, and whatever kind of sport or activity they do, you're not seeing a whole lot left over, if any. However, most people tell us, well, it's a job, you signed up for a job, and so you get paid for it. Since it is a job, I suppose, we'll go ahead and break that down per hour. 24 hours in a day, 83 cents an hour, folks. So, any takers? I'll get you signed up right now. I believe we have a social worker or 2 in the audience. So, 83 cents an hour, yes. Making a lot. Now, at 83 cents an hour, I can't think of anybody who's like, hey, I will get up when they're screaming their faces off at 83 cents an hour. No. I also can't think of anybody who for 83 cents an hour signs up knowing that you're going to love that child with your entire whole self, also knowing that on any given second, on any given day of the week, you have to give them back to their other family. Because that's not a job that you sign up for, that's a mission that you accept. Myths about foster care are commonplace in our community because we continually perpetuate these myths without really even thinking about it. I think back 15 years ago, and I certainly would have never thought my husband and I would be foster parents, let alone signing up, renewing our license for a third time. I always kind of thought that those kids had some troubles. And yeah, those kids do kind of have some troubles, but those troubles were put on them by somebody else. And I'm constantly reminded that there are still people that live out there with the exact same blinders on that I had back then. I get questions like, are all those your kids? Yes, they are. How many baby daddies do you have? We won't even get into that one. Which ones are your real kids? Well, they all eat my real food, so let ya. Thanks, Costco. Do you get to keep that one like, forever? And what did their real parents do? Washington State can and it should do better for its children. It's stated that at 12 months, we should be seeking permanency for these kids. However, through a continual series of loopholes and continuances, we are not able to find stable permanency with everything stacked up against these children. It's noted that in Arkansas and California, permanency or termination of parental rights can be sought for children at 12 months. Also in Arkansas and California, if a child has a sibling who has been TPR'd, they can also seek TPR for the sibling as well. Also in Arkansas and California, if a child's sibling has suffered abuse or neglect, that's grounds for looking into termination of that child. Essentially, they are looking at cases in a proactive way rather than a reactive way. In Minnesota, they're asking parents to be able to provide basic necessities. We're talking food, clothing, shelter. And if they cannot, then they're asking them to start being able to prove that they're attempting to. Also in Minnesota, they run what's called a concurrent permanency planning. So while reunification is their primary goal, it should be, children do belong with their biological families. However, they run another goal side by side with that. So it's not reunification to the detriment of that child. And also in Minnesota, they collaborate with everybody involved in that child's life, including the foster parents. A revolution is defined as a sudden, radical, or complete change. We know that it's really taking about 2 to 3 years to see children finding permanency, whether that's with their families or otherwise. And that is where we need to see our complete change coming into play. Do we as a society value biology over the life of a child? And if so, then how do we support the nature in this situation so that it can nurture its offspring? Does that look like better mental health care and more wraparound services? Because what we're doing right now is simply not working. I wanted to tell you one final story about that little girl who came in just 2 days after her 4th birthday. Emmy has the most brilliant memory of any little human I've ever seen. We can be anywhere in all the Tri-Cities, and if that location holds a memory for her, she will tell you all about it. And quite honestly, that's really not such a good thing for her. She walked into our house that evening and she looked around and said, "Hey guys, I'm home." As I looked down at her that night with those wispy little curls and that small voice that was only speaking 2 to 4 words at a time, I realized I knew this child. She had, in fact, been in my home for a short while before. And in that instant, I knew that when she left, it was going to wreck me. So I buckled in for what I was sure was going to be another long, bumpy ride. However, she was right. She was home forever. It was her time to heal, her time to bond, and her time to have a family. We're currently in our final stages of adoption with her right now. And so I ask you, are you ready to join a revolution? Are you sitting there wondering right now what you could be doing? Call your representatives and demand a change in the foster care laws. Become a youth mentor. Volunteer at places like the Tri-City Union Gospel Mission, Restoration Convoy, or Beautifully Inspired. Become a guardian ad litem. And finally, friends, if there is that still, small voice whispering in the back of your mind and urging you to do something more, then listen to it and jump in with both feet and your arms wide open, because on the other end is a child waiting for you. I would have rather loved and let go than to have never loved at all. Thank you.